The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, greetings. Welcome to another presentation in this public service nation-building series, The Law and You. This is program number 991, coming to you on Monday, the 14th of December, 2020. On this program, I will continue the topic I started 2 Mondays ago, the decline of civil society. This will be the decline of civil society part 2. But before I get into the topic, a few brief preliminary comments, and I will try to make them as short as possible. Firstly, my condolences go out to all families which have suffered recent bereavements. And in that connection, I want to send special condolences to a member of my church, Sister Jennifer Davis, who died a few days ago. Condolences to her husband, Brother Davis, to her children, her daughter Yolande, and all the rest of the family. She will be laid to rest this Sunday, the 20th of December, after a service at St. Elizabeth Cathedral, Belmont. Unfortunately, we are told that the Belmont Cemetery is full, cannot take another grave. And the family have been directed to bury her elsewhere, and they have chosen to do that at the Golden Vale Cemetery. I don't know if between now and then the grave diggers might find one little spot at Belmont, but the word is right now the Belmont Cemetery is totally filled to capacity. Then, on a happier note, I want to send happy birthday greetings to our daughter Alpha Anthoria Campbell. Today being her birthday, Alpha, all the very best to you from myself, your mom, all your siblings, and all the members of the extended family. And in that connection, let me say a belated happy birthday to your younger brother, Daniel Tambo Samuel Campbell, whose birthday was on Sunday the 6th. Happy birthday as well to my brother Brennan. He was on the 7th. And to our dearly beloved, very Reverend Lucy Rogers of the Spiritual Baptist Archdiocese, our Vicar General. She celebrated in the week. Excuse me, please. And belated congratulations as well, which I should have said last Monday, but as you know, unfortunately, there was no program of the Law on You last week, Monday. Belated congratulations to my said son, Daniel, who took unto himself a bride on his birthday, the very beautiful Dr. Nicole Cupid of Belmont, who is now Dr. Nicole Cupid Campbell. Pleasant good evening to the Cupid family. We had a lovely time at a small wedding ceremony at Sunset Shores. All right, well, that is all for preliminaries. I want to get straight into the program. Those of you who had seen part 1 of this program, which was aired 2 Monday nights ago and repeated last Monday night, would recall that I was dealing with the question of the decline of civil society as seen through the eyes of a young brother, Kenrick Kwashi, who has written on the topic. And I ventured on the program at least one of the reasons for the decline of civil society in recent years. And I also mentioned that it was one of the main recommendations which the Constitutional Review Commission had made when we had presented our proposals to the Parliament. Remember, for those who didn't see the program, let me tell you that the Constitutional Review Commission was made up of representatives of the two political parties and 15 civil society groups of organizations made up the CRC. And we toiled for several years, going up and down the Caribbean, North America, and England, interviewing Vincentians, listening to their views, and we put our collective wisdom to work, and we came up with what we thought were some solid proposals for a change of governance in this country. And the foundation of those proposals was to change the structure of Parliament from a two-sided structure of government and opposition, and as we know, always at war with one another, to a three-sided structure, government, opposition, and the civil society. And I did promise you last program that I would reread some of our recommendations to show the reasons why we recommended that to the two political parties which had set us up. And you will recall I told you that when we submitted our proposals to the two parties in Parliament as government and opposition, they said we'll have none of it. And the government and opposition shut down those proposals, said they don't want civil society in Parliament. You should only come into Parliament if you represent one party or the other. Nobody coming into Parliament through the back door. And so the pamper set. Whereupon the civil society members of CRC, who were in a vast majority, practically down tools. They were so disappointed and dejected to know that the best idea we came up with, having been mandated to make recommendations for a new scheme of governance for this country, the best recommendation we thought we made, the two political parties said, no, we'll have none of it. And that discouraged the civil society members. So when the referendum came about, they didn't bust pip. They didn't put their backs to the wheel because they figured the government and opposition were not serious at the time about constitutional change of a meaningful kind, and they didn't have any further time to waste. But that is for another story. I am reading from our revised, or not revised, because I'll read from the revised report on a future occasion. Our final report to the House of Assembly, presented on the 28th of February 2005. And I think I would ask the government to fund a reprint of this document for those who are serious about changing our governance. You see, year after year we find things to quarrel about. People say they should have integrity legislation. They say that we should get an end to tribalism, political tribalism, and all sorts of faults they find with the present arrangement. Well, that is precisely why we were set to work in 2003 on recommending a new structure. We saw that there was a need for change, and when the referendum was shut down and nothing was put in place of the proposals we had put forward, we knew that the time would come when people would start to moan and groan and say, oh Lord, we need so-and-so, we need so-and-so. But most of the things people moan and groan about, we had recommended them in our report. And they were either shut down in Parliament or shot down in the referendum. Now, I read you therefore from, well, there is quite a lot of reading. In fact, I doubt I'll get through all of it tonight. So I probably have to go into another session. But from page 7 of our report, paragraph 20, these are the things we recommended to the government, Parliament and government and opposition in Parliament. 20, there should be a single-chamber, unicameral legislative body to be called the National Assembly, consisting of 27 persons. 21, the term opposition should be abolished in favor of the term minority. And the designation leader of the opposition should be abolished in favor of the term minority leader. It is recommended that the minority leader should be given specific responsibilities and/or enhanced powers so as to reduce the purely adversarial nature of party politics and encourage majority-minority cooperation in the national interest. As we know, the Constitution doesn't really provide much for the leader of the opposition to do by way of participation and governance. Paragraph 22, the number of geographical constituencies should be increased from 15 to 17 to be contested by political parties and independent candidates on the first past the post basis as obtained at present. That is, first past the post. If a candidate gets one more vote than another one, that candidate wins the constituency, as has happened in the elections of November 5th this year. Paragraph 23, the number of senators should be reduced from 6 to 3. 24, of the 3 senators, 2 should be appointed by the President on the recommendation of the Prime Minister, and 1 should be appointed by the President on the recommendation of the minority leader. 25, in the event that there is no minority leader, the President should appoint the minority senator on the advice of the leader of the political party polling the second highest number of votes. 26. The 3 senators should have all of the powers, privileges, and immunities enjoyed by the political representatives, including the right to vote on bills which seek to amend the Constitution. But the senators should not be permitted to vote on motions of no confidence in the government. Paragraph 27. The 2 government senators should be eligible for ministerial appointments. 28. The remaining 7 positions in the National Assembly should consist of the democratically elected representatives of civil society, elected by civil society constituencies as follows. 1. 2 persons representing Vincentians in the diaspora. 2. 5 persons democratically elected by civil society to represent the civil society appropriately grouped in 5 categories, which should encompass faith-based institutions, labor organizations, youth, non-profit commercial organizations, social, sports, and cultural organizations, gender organizations, the challenged human rights organizations, service clubs, senior citizens, professional organizations, farmers and fisherfolk, and other organizations. I skip out paragraph 29, that deals with the diaspora representatives. And they go to 30. The costs associated with the participation in governance by the diaspora representatives should be offset in whole or in part by funds raised and contributed by those Vincentian organizations in the diaspora which would have participated in the processes of electing the diaspora representatives. Paragraph 31. Legislation should be enacted to make appropriate provisions for the participation of civil society in governance. In particular, such legislation should ensure A, that the civil society bodies and civil society groupings operating within individual constitutions containing provisions which enshrine democratic principles and practices. B, that the procedures for the election of officers are free, fair, transparent, and subject to the jurisdiction of the supervisor of elections. C, that the provisions for financial accountability in the constitutions of civil society bodies are strict. D, that there is a proper and efficient system of selecting voting delegates who would comprise the electoral colleges charged with the responsibility of electing the respective civil society representatives to the National Assembly. E, that effective provisions are made for the mechanics of electing and participation by the diaspora representatives. And F, that provisions are made for the recall in specified circumstances of civil society representatives by their respective constituencies. Excuse me. (33) The civil society representatives in the National Assembly should, as legislator, be vested with all of the powers, privileges, and immunities enjoyed by the political representatives, including the right to vote on bills for the amendment of the Constitution, save that the civil society representatives should not vote on motions of no confidence in the government. And the civil society representatives should be eligible for ministerial appointment. 35. The minimum age for election as a political representative or as a civil society representative or for the appointment of a senator should be reduced from 21 years to 18 years. 36. Ministers of religion and Vincentian holding dual or even multiple citizenship should not be disqualified from seeking candidacy for membership in the National Assembly. Saw somebody wrote a letter recently in the paper saying that ministers of religion should be allowed to run for office as constituency representatives. Well, we had recommended that in the proposed new constitution. All right. 37. Section 44 of the Constitution, and I've spoken on Section 44 before, which prohibits non-ministerial members of Parliament from proposing certain financial measures, should be abolished. Any member of the National Assembly should be permitted to propose any measure to the National Assembly. You would recall that for years, the New Democratic Party had introduced a social and redemption charter in Parliament. And the Speaker ruled it out of order. Why? Because the Constitution says that if you're not a minister, you can't put forward a motion in Parliament that entails the spending of monies from the consolidated fund. That is the reason why the Social and Redemption Charter hasn't seen the light of day up to now. The Speaker says that offends the Constitution and indeed the rules of the House. It's simply that once you're not a minister and you're an ordinary member of the House, whether on the government side or opposition side, you can't put forward something in Parliament that calls on the government to spend money. Now, we found that is total nonsense, but it's part of our Constitution. And we advocated that you should get rid of that. If you're a member of Parliament, you should be allowed to propose anything, particularly matters involving spending money. All right. And we made other recommendations. I will go on now to deal with the details of our proposals for civil society. So I go right over to paragraph 165 of our recommendations. We propose to Parliament: the CRC has been mandated by Parliament to review the Constitution of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and to submit recommendations regarding reforms of and the changes in the Constitution. 166. Within that broad mandate, the CRC has identified 3 critical overriding objectives. 1. To deepen and strengthen democratic values and practices. 2. To minimize, if not eliminate, political tribalism from the body politic. And 3. To provide a meaningful framework for the involvement of civil society in governance. I'll repeat that. To provide a meaningful framework for the involvement of civil society in governance. That is what the 2 political parties said they didn't want. Paragraph 167. The first stated objective, namely the deepening and strengthening of democratic values and practices, embraces several basic components, among others. A. Enhancing fundamental rights and freedoms. B. Ensuring that political authority rests upon and reflects the will of the people as expressed in periodic free and fair elections at national, local, and institutional levels. C. Ensuring the continuance of the rule of law administered by a competent and independent judiciary operating within effective and responsive legal systems accessible to all citizens regardless of political, social, or economic status. And D. Ensuring that governance exists in a culture of accountability, transparency, and efficiency. Paragraph 168. The second overriding objective, namely the minimizing or eliminating of political tribalism, is altogether a most challenging goal. Professor Selwyn Ryan, in his recent book, Winner Takes All, has demonstrated with great clarity the true nature of party politics in the Commonwealth Caribbean. The picture he paints is not a pleasant one, but one which is distressingly familiar to all Caribbean people. Paragraph 169. The third overriding objective, namely involving civil society in governance in a meaningful way, is highly attainable. In other words, we felt this can be done. That objective is not only desirable in and of itself, We will argue that it is crucial both to the deepening of democracy and to the minimizing of political tribalism. That's what we told the Parliament. I skip paragraph 170 and I go to 171. The questions immediately arise. If civil society can constitute 3/5 of the membership of a body entrusted with the responsibility of recommending changes to the Constitution, why should civil society not constitute one of the permanent components of governance? Why should the running of the country be left practically exclusively to political parties? And brothers and sisters, this is the crucial factor, you know. The politicians at the time were not interested in having anybody come into Parliament unless those persons comprising that body belong to one party or the other one. The politicians were not really interested in sharing their power and authority with anybody else. And when they made that clear to civil society by rejecting the notion of civil society being part of the governance, civil society lost interest in matters of reform of governance. So we are seeing the unfortunate fruits of those ill-considered positions taken at the time by our parliamentarians on both sides of the aisle. Now, if we are serious about reform, we simply cannot leave governance up to politicians alone. That was our thesis in the CRC, based on all our discussions with Vincentians in the parts of the world where we visited, based on our discussions here and at home, and based among the hundreds of hours of deliberation we put in here, as we used to meet practically every week upstairs the House of Assembly, deliberating these matters. But the politicians made it clear by rejecting the central thesis that we put forward. Politicians made it clear that they were not really interested in fundamental change that threatened their monopoly of power. Sorry. No. If there's a change of heart, and if with the passage of time, 11 years since the referendum, if on mature consideration we now realize as a country that changes have to be made, then we stand a chance in the future that we might be able to make some of those changes if the politicians can agree between themselves. But for the time being, the politicians control governance. And as long as they do not want to relinquish that control, as long as they do not want any other bodies to come into Parliament to be a countervailing force, things would simply get from bad to worse. We'll be spinning top in mud. So I'm saying that the time has come for the two political parties to revisit the whole question of constitutional reform. We can't leave the Constitution as it is and expect all of a sudden there will be an improvement in governance. No. Experience has taught us that things are getting worse and worse. We are becoming more and more tribalistic. We have a situation where now, whether it's right or wrong, I don't know, but people are complaining that you can only get road work if you demonstrate affiliation with one side. That is the allegation being made. As I said, whether it's true or false, I do not know, but that is the firm belief of many people. And many people are saying, unless you show that you're a party person in sympathy with the ruling party, you are not favored with various things which ordinary citizens ought to be favored with from the state. Now, there is much more to read, and even though I didn't really plan on that, I think I would have to devote one further final program to reading the rest of our recommendations on civil society. Now, you may feel that, oh Lord, Campbell going on with this thing and so on. And, well, I intend to beat it like a road match because from my vantage point as a neutral person politically, I don't see us getting any better. I don't see the society developing if we go along the way we have been going. And I don't see how we can change the way we are going if the system is not changed. That is the point. Once we continue the system we have, things will continue to deteriorate. That is my simple thesis. We may not agree, but that is the way I see it. All right, well, that is all from this program of The Law and You, program number 991. I look forward to being of further service to you next week, Monday Night TV, for another presentation in this public service nation building series, The Law and You. Do have a pleasant week, ladies and gentlemen, and may the good Lord continue to bless us all.
The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.